gotta do what I gotta do.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 8 of the MMA Rundown. My name is Ben Gordon. I'll be your host as per usual. This week we had a lot of stuff going on. A lot of what we will be covering here is the UFC on Fox event from over the weekend, and also looking ahead to UFC Nashville. There was also a pretty big ADCC trial event. A few big names from MMA were involved in there, but I'll be going over that as well. And also looking at what happened with Dylan Dennis at the Marcelo Garcia Academy and all the other usual stuff. So to get started, we'll talk about Mighty Mouse and his win over Wilson Hayes. So coming into this fight, I had predicted that Mighty Mouse would win. That's not a bold prediction by any standpoint, not a hot take. Obviously, he did win, no big surprise there. But when I was talking about this fight, I was saying that for Wilson Hayes to win, he'd have trouble getting Mighty Mouse down, but if he got him down, he'd have to kind of keep him there for a little while and be able to work from there. A couple of points he was able to sort of, I guess depending on what ruling you're going by, you could say he got a takedown, but it was never any control. He couldn't even hold Mighty Mouse down for 3 seconds, so he never really was able to work from the top. Had a couple chances to work from bottom, but really didn't do much from there. But with that being said, Wilson Hayes is a highly accomplished grappler. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. And for Mighty Mouse to win the way he did is a humongous statement. With that being said, I think it's important to make a big distinction here. So I think a lot of fans, especially if you're a little bit more casual, you may get the idea that with Mighty Mouse winning by submission, that this shows how great of a grappler Mighty Mouse is and that he's an even better grappler than Wilson Hayes is. Don't fall for that. That's not the case. Wilson Hayes is still a superior grappler to Mighty Mouse. The fact that Mighty Mouse won by submission doesn't change that. It's important to kind of note how the submission came. At that point in the fight, Wilson had kind of given up, and it's also important to note, you know, you always hear the thing where you punch a black belt once, it becomes a brown belt. You punch him another time, it becomes a purple belt. That was in play to an extent. Wilson really didn't look all that active on the ground. He's looked a lot better in actual grappling matches than he did in that fight. And it's kind of weird how even when the armbar was applied, he really wasn't like going out of his way to defend that much either. Like he really wasn't all that active. It looked like he was kind of content to be done. Usually you see that with a lot of rear naked chokes. It seems as though most rear naked chokes that you'll see that finish a fight, it's not as though the guy who finishes with a rear naked choke was just so slick and he just stuck it in there and got the finish. That does happen. You'll see that a lot with Damian Maia and some of the other top jiu-jitsu guys, where if they get a guy down early, they're able to kind of slip it in. But a lot of times it's after the guy's been getting beaten up a lot, or he's in a bad position where he's getting beaten up and he kind of realizes, hey, I'm kind of fucked here. I'm either going to get submitted or I'm going to have to get knocked out here. I'd probably rather just get choked out and be able to tap. So they kind of give it up and then give the choke up easy. In a way, this was kind of like that with the arm, where Wilson, you can kind of tell he was done with that fight. He was ready to get out of there, and Mighty Mouse was able to get to mount past his guard rather surprisingly easy. No knock on Mighty Mouse, his technique was really good in there, but even with the armbar, like there were some technical adjustments he could definitely make on the finish. He was initially crossing his legs, a little loose when he swung over, but even still, I mean, good job on his part. He sensed that the finish was there. He went for it. Pretty bold strategy. Now, granted, it was at the end of the round to go for the armbar, because a lot of times when you take the armbar from mount, there are a lot of people in jiu-jitsu who feel like that's a submission you really shouldn't go for, because if you miss it, then all of a sudden you're going from a great position mount to ending up on your back. And especially with a guy like Wilson Hayes, you don't want him to be on top of you. So to take that kind of a risk is, I mean, it's a great sign for Mighty Mouse. He's hit that armbar before in other fights. I know he hit John Moraga. He got John Moraga with it. I feel like he may have hit it in another fight too, but to go for that on a guy like Wilson, to take that kind of chance, even with there being probably about 30 seconds left in the round, that shows a lot on Mighty Mouse's side, and I feel like that's not being commended as much as it should be. And also, since Wilson's a guy who even hardcore fans aren't exactly sure who he is, I feel like the fact that Mighty Mouse submitted him isn't being given the play that it should be. But huge win for him. A lot of people right now are talking about whether or not this means that Mighty Mouse is the greatest of all time, and to me, the greatest of all time debate is probably the most annoying debate in all of sports, because it ends up becoming a thing where people stop arguing who the more skilled or better technical fighter is or the better technical athlete is, and they just kind of make it who is the most accomplished instead of who's the best. And you hear this a lot with basketball, where when you're looking at Jordan versus Kobe or even Jordan versus LeBron, everyone's always talking about six rings. Jordan's got 6 championships. This guy doesn't have as many championships, therefore Jordan's better. And it's like, if you're actually going to debate Jordan versus LeBron, you should probably be talking about who's the better defender, who's the better dribbler, who's got a better jump shot, who's better at getting to the rim. Like, those are the kinds of things you have to argue about, not exactly how many rings they have. And I think that should really be how the MMA debate goes too. It shouldn't be, well, Anderson had 10 straight title defenses, and this guy had this many title defenses, and this guy won this many title fights. Like, it shouldn't be about how many title fights you won. It should be more about, like, skill for skill and base it off of that. And when you look at it that way, I mean, it's hard not to say that DJ's the guy. I think if you're going to make an argument against DJ, you have to look at the fact that DJ's had some losses prior to his long run. He lost to Brad Pickett. Even a couple of his wins he lost to Dominic Cruz, obviously, but even a couple of the wins weren't exactly all that impressive. He beat Miguel Torres in a fight that I would have to, you'd probably have to score for Miguel Torres, but the judges didn't, so he got away with a win there. He had the loss to Brad Pickett. He ended up having a draw with Ian McCall in one of those tournament fights, but it appeared as though McCall had won that fight too. But when they rematched, Johnson made clear that he was the better fighter from that point forward, and I'd have to say today McCall still loses that fight if they do it again, but even at the time, it was still a tough win for him. So if you're looking at him today, as far as whether Mighty Mouse is the best, I have a hard time saying yes definitively, because Cruz's only loss since the time he beat Mighty Mouse was to Cody Garbrandt. But again, if Cruz and Mighty Mouse fight today, if we're going skill for skill, it's almost, I feel like it'd still be hard to say that Cruz loses that fight. Mighty Mouse has gotten a lot better since then, but Cruz was pretty controlling in that fight. So for Mighty Mouse to jump all the way up there while Cruz is still improving in his own right, it's tough to say that he wins that fight. But if you have to say, if it's not Mighty Mouse, who is it? Anderson's a tough guy to say no to. Now, with Anderson now, he's fighting into his late 30s, early 40s, so we're seeing a lesser version of Anderson. I feel like that's clouding people's judgments, but the Anderson that was champion, the Anderson that was just tearing everybody up on the feet, the Anderson that when he get on his back, he'd still manage to be able to find submissions and be able to work from there and still get his offense going. Even if he was getting beat on for 4 rounds against Chael, he still found the triangle. He got taken down by Dan Henderson, but still able to kind of fight through that and ended up finishing him by submission. Triangle Travis Lutter, which is kind of a similar situation to Mighty Mouse finishing Wilson Hayes, in that Lutter is a better pure grappler than Silva, but Silva caught him in submission. Same type of thing here, where Hayes is a better pure grappler than Mighty Mouse, but Mighty Mouse caught him, but still impressive nonetheless. So if you look at what prime Anderson Silva was doing versus what Mighty Mouse in his prime right now is doing, I think it's more visually impressive what Anderson did, but skill for skill, I think if you kind of make like a 185 version of Mighty Mouse, which is kind of unfair because 185 person isn't going to be able to move like him. But if you look at the really strong wrestling background, really active footwork on the feet, good boxing, kicks are okay, ever improving grappling, good passing game, able to finish. You could definitely make a case that a 185-pound Mighty Mouse of today probably beats a 185-pound Anderson Silva in his heyday. So if you're going to make the argument that Mighty Mouse is the best, please at least make it like based on skill instead of just, oh, well, now that he's hit 10 championships. Don't make it as though like the Mighty Mouse who waited on Friday with the 9 straight championship defenses wasn't the greatest of all time, but the Mighty Mouse who walked out of the cage with 10 straight was, because it's not like he got significantly better over the course of a day. So if you're going to argue it, at least argue it based on skill, but if you're going to make the skill argument, there really is an argument to make that he is the greatest of all time.